for a pre-app on Friday? Yeah. Usually you guys know plan review. Ah.
I think we're good.
Yes, okay. All right, good evening. Welcome to the August 26th, 2020 meeting of the Lawrence Douglas County Metropolitan Planning Commission. I'm David Carter, Commission Chair, and before we continue, I'm going to turn this over to Kyle Kobe for our rules of engagement for this remote meeting.
Thank you very much. My name is Kyle Kobe, and I'll be facilitating the Zoom video portion of the meeting. With me here is Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services Director. We will work alongside the chair, who's on remote video, to facilitate the meeting proceedings. Currently, I have everyone muted so we can talk through the general ground rules for tonight's meeting. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast live on the city's YouTube channel and public access cable channel 25. During the meeting, please mute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon found in the lower left-hand corner of the Zoom menu next to the video icon. When you are muted, a red line will appear over the icon. This will make it easier for everyone to hear the meeting. Just remember to unmute if and when you want to speak. In the menu, you can also turn your camera on or off by clicking the video icon located next to the microphone icon. For the purposes of this public meeting, please keep your video on for the duration. If you are participating by phone, you can enter *6 to mute and unmute your phone. Somewhere on your Zoom screen, you will also see a choice to toggle between speaker and gallery view. Speaker view shows the active speaker. Gallery view tiles all of the meeting participants. Be aware that we will not be screen sharing as a part of the meeting this evening. All attachments, reference materials, and submissions from the public are included in the agenda packet. A few reminders to ensure that the provisions of the Kansas Open Meetings Act are met. Commissioners, you must state your name and title each time you speak. Members of city staff must also state their name and title each time they speak. Would also ask that the applicants and members of the public identify themselves each time before they speak to ensure that everyone is able to follow along. Individuals who signed up in advance to provide public comments remotely will be called upon by name. When you are called on, please unmute your listening device and state your name before speaking. The chair will then call for in-person public comment for those who are physically present. Staff will direct you to the podium to speak while following social distancing and safety protocols. All motions will need to be stated clearly. After a motion is made and seconded, staff will call on each commissioner individually to provide their vote. Staff will then announce whether the motion carried and the count of the vote. I want to again remind everyone to please mute yourself when you're not speaking. Now I'll turn the meeting back over to the chair.
Thank you, Kyle. David Carter, Chair. Let's begin by with a little bit of housekeeping. Jeff, can you please confirm if we've received any written communications from the public that's not already in our packet?
Jeff Craig, Planning and Development Services Director. All communications are part of your packet.
Thank you, David Carter, Chair. How about written communications from staff, planning commissioners, or other commissioners?
Jeff Craig, Planning and Development Services. We have none.
All right, thank you. David Carter, Chair. How about written action of any waiver requests or determinations made by the city engineer?
Jeff Craig, Planning and Development Services Director. No additional items this evening.
Very good. I'll turn over to commissioners. Do I have any disclosure of ex parte communications? Okay, seeing none. How about any abstentions from specific agenda items from commissioners? Okay. This is the part of the meeting when we open the floor to any general public comment on items that are not already on the agenda. We don't have anyone signed up for general public comment. Kyle, can I ask you to confirm if there's anyone in the chamber?
Kyle Kobe with Planning. There's nobody here.
All right, thank you very much. Then let's, David Carter, Chair, let's go ahead and turn this over to the regular agenda. Item 1, consider approving a request to rezone approximately 1.02 acres near 3530 West 22nd Street. And Becky, I think, is going to give us a presentation.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Becky Pepper. I'm a planner with the Planning and Development Services Department. And as you mentioned, this request proposes the rezoning of approximately 1.02 acres from a planned commercial development district to a neighborhood commercial center district. The subject property is located near the intersection of Clinton Parkway and Hartford Avenue, which is just west of Castle Drive. The property is part of the Parkway Plaza PCD that includes the commercial developments that are located at the northwest corner of Castle Drive and Clinton Parkway. In addition to those commercial uses, there are also residential land uses in the area that include single dwellings and multi-dwellings located to the west and south. The subject property was vacant until it was developed with a bank drive-through ATM in 1995, and the ATM has since been removed. The rezoning was requested by the property owner to facilitate the development of a fast order food drive-in use at the site. The existing PCD district permits some eating establishment uses. However, it excludes ones that provide drive-up service to vehicles. And the rezoning would remove the property from the PCD district and assign it with the current zoning designation of CN2, which would permit the fast order food drive-in use with approval of a special use permit. A special use permit application has not been submitted at this time, but if the zoning were approved and a special use permit application were submitted, that SUP application would be brought to the Planning Commission for a public hearing and a recommendation by the body at that time. The CN2 zoning district permits uses which are appropriate for a neighborhood commercial center. And likewise, the current PCD designation was also intended to create a neighborhood commercial center. And we've provided attachments in your packet that show the commercial uses permitted under the current PCD zoning, and that would be permitted if the rezoning were approved. In a sense, this request is a lateral rezoning. The current zoning district, which was intended to accommodate that the neighborhood commercial center district, would be replaced with a base zoning district that was also intended to facilitate a neighborhood commercial center district. So in addition to the property being well suited for the proposed CN2 zoning, the request also conforms with the policies of Plan 2040. It also would not detrimentally affect the nearby properties, and there would be no gain to the public health, safety, or welfare if the approval of with the approval of the rezoning request. The full findings of fact are provided in the staff report, and based on those findings, staff recommends forwarding the rezoning request to the City Commission with a recommendation for approval. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have, and the applicant is also here. Thank you.
Okay, and I believe CL Maurer is on the call.
Yeah, CL Maurer with Land Plan Engineering. I don't really have any presentation. Becky did a great job. The main thing is the reason that we're doing this is just that with the old PCDs, you had to end up getting all the neighbors to agree and go through a whole lot of shuffling. The straight base zoning makes it a lot easier, just as simple. Even though it's still an SUP, the process is a lot easier. So with that, I'm open to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Maurer. David Carter, Chair. We don't have anyone signed up for public comment. Kyle, could I ask you to confirm if anyone's in the chamber to make a comment?
Kyle Kobe with planning. There's nobody here.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. David Carter, Chair. With that, I'll turn it over to the commission. Any commissioners have any questions or comments, observations, etc.? Commissioner Ashworth.
Commissioner Ashworth, I didn't have a chance to go visit the site, but just looking at the aerial photo, I'm just curious if there is a sort of ditch or some kind of waterway to the west of that property, and if that poses any concern with development of that parcel.
This is Becky Pepper, planner with the Planning Department. There is a floodplain, a regulatory floodplain located on the property. There is an area that would be available for development outside of that floodplain area. So they would be most likely looking to develop in that area outside of the floodplain, and there would be a floodplain permit review that would also be a part of the development process.
Thank you, Becky. David Carter, Chair. Other questions, comments? Motions?
Rob Sands, Planning Commissioner, Mr. Chair. Like everyone says, it seems fairly straightforward. I'm glad that there will be a use for that, because right now it's without a function to it. And the times where I've driven by it, it's served more as a temporary parking lot or a drop-off pickup point for whatever. So if no one has any objections, I'd like to make a motion.
Please go ahead.
I recommend approval of the request to rezone approximately district based on the findings presented in the staff report and forward it to the City Commission with recommendation for approval. And I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, were you about to say something? Because my connection is really fuzzy right now.
No, David Carter, Chair. I was just asking you to please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, thank you.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Commissioner Sinclair by hand motion. Any further discussion?
All right, Jeff, could I ask you to call the roll, please?
Certainly. Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services.
Commissioner Ashworth?
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Carter?
Yes.
Commissioner Sands?
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair?
Yes.
Commissioner Struckoff?
Yes.
Commissioner Willie?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you, Jeff. David Carter, Chair. That brings us to item number 2. Consider approving a variance from frontage standards provided in section 20.810 of the Subdivision Regulations for Home Sweet Home Dog Resort located at 1837 Wakarusa Drive. And Becky, I believe you've got a presentation again.
Thank you. Again, my name is Becky Pepper. I'm a planner with the Planning and Development Services Department. This item for your consideration is a variance from the frontage standards of the Subdivision Regulations, which state that all lots shall have frontage on a public street. The subject property is located at 1837 Wakarusa Drive. It is currently platted as one lot. The minor subdivision application was submitted to divide that one lot into two, with the proposed lot 1 fronting on Wakarusa Drive and the proposed lot 2 located behind lot 1. Minor subdivision applications are administratively reviewed. However, variances must be considered by the Planning Commission. There are 3 criteria that must be met for a variance to be granted. The first is whether strict application of the subdivision regulations will create an unnecessary hardship on the subdivider. In staff's opinion, strict adherence to the code may constitute an unnecessary hardship in this instance. The property was platted in 1996 under the previous subdivision regulations and zoning codes. Under those standards, a lot width of 200 feet was required, which created the current lot configuration, which is approximately 250 feet wide and 450 feet deep. In 2006, new subdivision regulations and zoning codes were adopted, which allowed for a smaller lot width of 100 feet. However, given the depth of the property, splitting the lot lengthwise would create two long rectangular lots that could have some design challenges related to building size or building orientation, and other challenges perhaps associated with parking and access. Granting the variance would allow the applicant to utilize the property in a manner that matches the existing land uses and built form of the street and the surrounding neighborhoods, while also maximizing the use of the whole lot as platted. The second criterion is that the proposed variance is in harmony with the intended purpose of the subdivision regulations. The minor subdivision application proposes the creation of a cross-access easement that would grant access to Lot 2 from Wakarusa Drive. There is also an existing access easement that runs between the properties to the north and provides shared access to West 18th Street. Together, these easements would act like a private street, providing the adjacent properties access to both West 18th Street and Wakarusa Drive. This is similar to another access alternative permitted in the subdivision regulations that allows access to lots via a joint use driveway when access cannot be provided directly from a street. The difference between the two is that a joint use driveway is a private agreement between the adjoining properties, whereas this proposed access easement would be a public easement. While different in that regard, the function is similar. So given that, granting the variance is reasonable because it would meet the spirit and intent of the subdivision regulations. Finally, the third criterion is that the public health, safety, and welfare will be protected. Granting this variance will not affect these things. The proposed variance will remain subject to the requirements of the Land Development Code that include things like building coverage and impervious surface maximums, parking, setback, and drainage requirements. Staff recommends approval of the variance requested for the minor subdivision from the public street requirements of section 20-810B in accordance with the provisions of section 20-813G of the Land Development Code. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, and also the applicant is here if you have questions for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Let's see, I believe Darren Aman and Anthony Barnett are on the call.
Yes. Hello,
Yes.
Commissioners. Darren Ammon, Bartlett and West, and Anthony Barnett is on the phone via the line as well. I don't have a whole lot to add in addition to the presentation that Becky had presented. So thanks, Becky, for all of that. Hit on all the topics. I guess I'd just like to add real briefly that in order to maximize the use of this property for the current use, if you've been along Wakarusa Drive late, you see the Home Sweet Home Dog Resort is under construction. And this will help facilitate an access to that future back lot, which could be connected, as Becky said, to 18th Street through a private access easement as well. So this seems to make the most sense and facilitates both the need and use for the ownership, as well as they're also going through some small business loans, which is financial related, to try to help things work. And some of this is needed for some of that. But we believe this helps facilitate both the need and use of this project for them. And I'll turn it over to Anthony if he has anything else to add, and I'd be happy to answer any questions, but would appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ammon. And Mr. Barnett?
I don't have anything to add, really. Everybody did a good job with it. It's mostly to fulfill a requirement through the SBA to finish the approval of the financing. That was really the motivation behind it.
Very good. Thank you. David Carter, Chair. There's no one signed up for public comment. Kyle, anyone present to make a comment?
Kyle Kobe with Planning, there is none.
Thank you. David Carter, Chair. With that, I'll turn it over to the committee. Any questions for Becky or the applicants? If there are no questions from other commissioners, I guess I'd like to ask the applicant, can you, I mean, I think I have no specific objection to anything that's been laid out here. I'm just curious why the decision for this configuration instead of relying on the easement from the north?
Because the lot is designed as the pet campus concept, and we wanted to have our entrance handle our traffic, and I didn't want to be imposing on neighbors or the other streets. I just wanted to keep what I was responsible for kind of within my lot. So that was mostly the motivation to keep it the access at Wakarusa.
Very good. Thanks very much, David Carter, Chair. Any other questions, comments from other commissioners? Commissioner Carpenter.
Jim Carpenter, Planning Commissioner. Could we just have a refresher from either staff or Randy as to the definition of unnecessary hardship?
Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services Director. Give me one moment to get that
definition for you. Jeff Craig, Planning and Development Services Director. The definition of an unnecessary hardship is defined in Article 8 for the Subdivision Regulations is, excuse me, one moment, my computer just blinked on me. The condition resulting from application of these regulations when viewing the property and its environment that it is so unreasonable as to become an arbitrary or capricious interference with the basic right of private property ownership, or convincing proof exists that it is impossible to use the property for a conforming use, or sufficient factors exist to constitute a hardship that would in effect deprive the owner of their property without compensation. Mere financial loss or the loss of a potential financial advantage does not constitute an unnecessary hardship.
Thank you, Jeff. Commissioner Carpenter, do you have a follow-up question?
No, I don't.
Thank you, David Carter, Chair. Other questions, comments, observations? Commissioner Willie.
Karen Willie, Planning Commissioner. I have a question for staff about private access easement. So who's in charge of paying for that or the upkeep of that? I know it's split between, or it's shared by a variety of commercial entities. And does that come into play immediately, or is that only when that lot is developed? Those are my two questions.
It's Becky Pepper, planner. I will start this, and then I will let Jeff fill in any information that I've left out. It would be it's considered a public easement in that the public can use it, but it would still be the property owner's responsibility for maintenance of that.
Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services Director. The only thing that I would add on in there is sometimes those agreements between two individuals has a recorded maintenance agreement upon how much responsibility each person that is utilizing it has to own, and also if there is the maintenance, how it goes through. So it can vary from each lot and individuals and how they kind of form their agreements, but it would be maintained by the individuals and the owners that have that responsibility as part of their parcels.
Thank you. Commissioner Willie.
Karen Willie, Planning Commissioner. Just so to follow up, that's an agreement that would be executed with the parties involved once that lot were to be developed, but at this point, it's not an issue, right?
Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services Director. Correct. It would be executed between the two private individuals when the agreement needs to be signed for.
Thank you, David Carter, Chair. Commissioner Willie, does that satisfy your question at this point?
It does for the moment. Thank you.
Very good.
This is Randy Larkin, Deputy City Attorney. I would note that most of those agreements then come through us and we look at them and make sure that maintenance and everything are covered. So we see almost all of those agreements when there's some type of approval, like through this process.
Thank you, Randy. David Carter, Chair. Other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Ashworth.
Commissioner Ashworth, just looking to see if there's any concern with traffic adding another entrance exit way off of Wakarusa. That would be for staff.
Becky Pepper, planner. The property has gone through site plan approvals also for the development, and that included this traffic impact studies that were necessary. So that entrance has been approved, yes.
Thank you, Becky. David Carter, Chair. Other questions? Or other actions? Commissioner Willie.
Karen Willie, Planning Commissioner. I'm not sure necessarily, I imagine Commissioner Carpenter might be going the direction of whether this is truly an unnecessary hardship, but I don't have any difficulties with splitting the lots this way and having, I think what it gains us is having 2 access points for fire medical through that complex of commercial buildings. And I think the campus idea probably suits it well. I don't have any difficulties with it, but I'm just throwing that out for other commissioners to talk about.
Thank you, Commissioner Willie. David Carter, Chair. Commissioner Carpenter, do you have any follow-up questions or concerns on this issue of unnecessary hardship?
Tim Carpenter, Planning Commissioner. No, I just wanted us to hear that definition again, because there are different concepts and it's pretty subjective when you get down to it. But in this particular case, we have a property that was set up under one code, and then we had a change in the code that's partially caused this. And in Becky's presentation, she mentioned if we went with strict adherence and made these 2 parallel east-west lots, that we would probably not be able to do much because of required setbacks and everything else that go along with that. So that's sufficient for me to meet the definition, because we have a 3-part definition. It's not simply you can't do anything with your property. It's that there are regulations and such that make it very difficult or nearly impossible to do things. And we've approved most of the other parts of this, I believe. So we're not, it'd be pretty, I think this is, as the applicant stated, this was caught by the bank, the Small Business Administration in the loan, that we suddenly had an issue that was required. And that's something none of us had considered up to this point. So I think we've met the definition of unnecessary hardship, and I think we should go ahead with this one.
Thank you, Commissioner Carpenter. David Carter, Chair. I would agree with Commissioner Carpenter's observations. We have a single curb cut, basically sharing the burden with the applicant who will occupy the street side property, and also reducing the burden on neighbors. I think it's all a reasonable request from my point of view. Would anyone like to post any further questions or make any further observations, or would someone like to make a motion? Commissioner Willie?
Karen Willie, Planning Commissioner, I would make a motion. I move that we approve the variance from frontage standards provided in section 20-810 of the subdivision regulations associated with the minor subdivision MS-20-246 for Home Sweet Home Dog Resort, addition number 1, located at 1837 Wakarusa Drive.
Thank you, Commissioner Willie. David Carter, Chair. Commissioner Carpenter, would you like to second, or do you have a further observation? Very
Second.
Good. Thank you. And any further discussion? Seeing none.
Jeff, could I ask you to call the roll, please?
Certainly. Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services. Commissioner Ashworth?
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Carter?
Yes.
Commissioner Sands?
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair?
Yes.
Commissioner Struckoff?
Yes.
Commissioner Willie?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you, Jeff. David Carter, Chair. This brings us to item number 3.
Thank you.
Let's see. Consider approving a variance from section 11-111 sub B2 of the subdivision regulations, requiring roads in the urban growth area to be built to standards. And this is for a property located in the northwest corner of North 1500 and East 800 roads. Mary, I believe you're going to present to us.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. Mary Miller, planner. As you may recall, in July, you heard a rezoning request and a preliminary plat for this property. And the rezoning was forwarded to the Board of County Commissioners with a recommendation for approval. However, due to some budgeting items they had to consider and also a quarry item, this has been deferred to the September 2nd meeting. And the preliminary plat was approved by the Planning Commission, and this approval is contingent upon that rezoning approval, but it is not contingent upon the approval of this variance. And the applicant requested a variance from the public improvement standards of the subdivision regulations, which require that subdivision roads within the UGA be constructed to the street standards of the city associated with that UGA. The 2006 subregs prohibited new subdivisions in the unincorporated portion of the county, so this standard has not been used since the adoption of the subregs in December of 2006. The subdivision regulations were revised earlier this year, along with the revised zoning regulations, so that subdivisions are now required in the urban growth area if you're creating more than 4 buildable parcels. This is intended to allow the creation of public roads rather than having the various users depend on a shared maintenance of a shared drive. Prior to the 2020 code changes, certificates of survey were processed in the urban growth area administratively and could create 10 or more developable parcels, which would all take access from a shared drive, similar to a private road, built to county rock road standards. And also, the comprehensive plan, Horizon 2020, was updated in 2019, Plan 2040, with new recommendations for the unincorporated area. With this update, the urban growth area was divided into tiers. You know, there's tier 1 that's within the city, tier 2 in close proximity to the city is expected to annex when developed, or at least within the life of the comprehensive plan. And tier 3 is not expected to annex during the life of the comp plan or within the next 20 years. Another recommendation of Plan 2040 is to conserve the visual distinction between urban and rural areas. Developing local roads in tier 3 of the urban growth area to county standards would help maintain this distinction. And city standards would require the road be paved with curb and gutters. And as Becky noted, the subregs do allow the Planning Commission to approve variances, provided 3 criteria are met. The first is that strict application of the regulations would create an unnecessary hardship on the subdivider. And as I mentioned, the regulations would require city streets to be developed in the urban growth area in tier 3. This would be a paved street with curbs and gutters. The curbs and gutters would provide stormwater management in an area that otherwise uses open ditches. Cownwaka Township indicated they do not have the equipment to maintain paved roads, and they would prefer a rock road. The curb and gutter would be an isolated feature and would not connect to other stormwater infrastructure, but would direct the flow into the ditches along North 1500 Road. Paving a road in tier 3 of the urban growth area, an area that's not expected to annex within the next 20 years, in a township that does not have the means to maintain it, and installing curbs and gutter in an area which manages stormwater flow with open ditches would be an unnecessary hardship for the subdivider, as it would serve no planning purpose. The next criterion is if the variance in harmony with the intended purposes of the subdivision regulations. And the regulations are intended to provide for the harmonious and orderly development of land. The requirement for roads to be constructed as city streets in Tier 2 of the urban growth area may be appropriate, as that area is expected to annex within the 20-year lifespan of the comprehensive plan. UGA did not consist of tiers when the standard was established with the 2006 subregs. New subdivisions were prohibited, but as I mentioned, cluster certificates of survey were permitted, and these utilized rock roads in the urban growth area. The city engineer indicated he had no concerns with the variance, provided the applicant execute an agreement not to protest the formation of a benefit district for street improvements, so that the road could be upgraded to city street standards when it is annexed into the city. And he also noted that when the property is annexed into the city, the connection to North 1500 Road would more than likely be removed and terminated in a cul-de-sac, and then connection would be provided to the east. The agreement not to protest, he indicated, should improve this, or note this improvement. The county engineer had no concerns with the variance, as this is a township maintained road. The variance would not hinder the harmonious and orderly development, provided the agreement not to protest future street improvements is executed and recorded with the final plat. And the third criterion is that the public health, safety, and welfare be protected, and developing the road in the same fashion as the other local roads in Conewaca Township should have no negative impact on the public health, safety, and welfare, as the township would be better able to maintain a rock road. It may be that the subdivision regulations would need to be revised to revise this requirement to apply to Tier 2 only, now that the comprehensive plan has been updated. And this would be evaluated with the review of revisions that are needed to bring our code into compliance or update them with the comprehensive plan. And so staff's recommendation is approval of the requested variance, subject to the condition that the property owner would execute the agreement not to protest the formation of the benefit district for future improvements to East 779 Road when annexed into the city of Lawrence. This would be recorded with the final plat, and the improvements would include, but are not limited to, sidewalks, pavement, curb and gutters, street trees, and the installation of the cul-de-sac at the southern end when access to East 800 Street or East 800 Road is required by the city engineer. The applicant is present today, and I'd be happy to answer questions if you have any for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. David Carter, Chair. I believe, so I've got 3 names down for the applicant. I believe 2 of them are here, Ms. Wakeman and Mr. Kramer. Would either of you like to say anything about the application following Mary's presentation? Ms. Wakeman?
Yes, thank you.
I think we might have a problem with Ms. Wakeman's connection.
Good evening, my name is Mary Wakeman, owner of the property presented in this report. I would like to thank the chair. I'm on. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Unfortunately, we weren't able to hear anything you said so far. Could you please start over? Sorry.
Hello?
Yes, yes. Can you hear us?
Go ahead, Ben.
Mr. Kramer, would you like to, no, David Carter, Chair, would you like to follow up, Mr. Kramer?
Good evening, Ben Kramer, Kramer Consulting. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, reasonably well.
Oh, yeah. Mary, I don't know if you heard, they said that they could not hear anything that you had said. Do you want to repeat any of that, or?
Go ahead.
Okay. I think basically what it is that Mary concurs with the recommendations of the staff, and that she will prepare the document not to protest any of the improvements.
Okay, thanks. David Carter, Chair. I see no one signed up for public comment. Kyle, could I ask you to confirm if anyone's there to comment on this item?
Kyle Kobe with Planning, I can confirm that.
Thank you, Kyle. David Carter, Chair. With that, I'll turn it over to the Commission. Questions for the applicant or for staff? Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Willie, did I see you raise your hand? No, okay. I guess I'll start. I would just like a little bit of clarification. David Carter, Chair, for staff. So, or I guess this may be for Mary. So we have one section of the code suggests that we need a paved road, but the township says that they don't have the equipment to maintain that. If we were to deny this this variance and require a paved road, what would be the consequences from the standpoint of maintenance over time? Who would be accountable for the maintenance of this road if the township doesn't have the necessary equipment?
Mary Miller, City County Planner, and I don't know if Mary Wakeman's able to answer, but I know in Grant Township they're not able to maintain paved roads, and so they let them deteriorate until they're gravel roads. And so I think the maintenance would be just an issue. It just would not be maintained. If potholes develop, they wouldn't be able to fill them. They could remove snow and do that kind of upkeep, but as far as repairing them, if they did like Grant Township, they just let their roads revert and go back to gravel.
Thank you, Mary. David Carter, Chair, just a follow-up question. So if the variance were granted and a rock road were constructed instead with the gutters and gullies that would drain into the gutter on North 1500 Road, would the township then be accountable for maintenance of the road?
Mary Miller, Planner, yeah, they'd be accountable for maintenance either way. It's just that their maintenance would be extremely limited, almost nothing if it was paved. Otherwise, they would maintain it like they do the other local roads in their township. They would grade it, apply dust palliative if the residents paid for it. You know, they would just do all the regular maintenance.
Thank you, Mary. David Carter, Chair. Other questions? Commissioner Willie.
So Mary, in terms of maintenance, how much maintenance would be required on a paved road within the time frame before this part of the county might likely fall under the city annexation anyway, with 20 to 30 years?
You know, we don't have a Mary Miller Planner. I don't know exactly how often they have to fill potholes on roads, but I know if you don't fill them, they usually get worse. And so it depends on the kind of weather we have. If we have really bad winters and potholes develop, then the maintenance, you know, it'd be an issue very quickly. We're not expecting this to annex within 20 years, and 20 years without, you know, doing any repairs or maintenance, I think could create issues.
Thank you, Mary. David Carter, Chair. Commissioner Ashworth.
Commissioner Ashworth, I just want to say that I think it's a very valid concern that any paved road there would, the stormwater running off into the ditches from a paved road would be, I think, a major issue. And so I agree with that. The fact of this being a rock road not only fits the character of the area, but it definitely will reduce that stormwater runoff or the severity of the stormwater runoff into the ditches in that area.
Thank you, Commissioner Ashworth. Any follow-up question or just the observation? Okay. David Carter, Chair. Commissioner Carpenter.
Jim Carpenter, Planning Commissioner. It's my understanding that built to city standards includes curb and gutter, stormwater system, and everything else, which would drain off of these properties into the ditches outside of this development. Is that correct, Mary?
The stormwater would be curb and gutter, and it would drain at the intersection where it intersects with 1500 roads. It would drain into those ditches. Typically, you would have other infrastructure to connect to. We don't usually take our stormwater and put it into an open ditch unless that's the plan, like a green infrastructure. But in this case, it would just be channeled down the road and then into the ditches along 1500 road.
Commissioner Carpenter, any follow-up questions? Or
Jim Carpenter, Planning Commissioner. I think one of the first applications is identified a problem with our new county zoning and subdivision regulations. Mary suggested that perhaps limiting the city standards to growth tier 2 might be worth considering. Growth tier 3, I don't buy it's going to take 20 years to get out to there. We're pushing towards that direction. Some of that's going to be held up, I'm sure, by city infrastructure. But when you look at the maps, just between Castle and K10, or even Wakarusa and K10, how much of that developed in 25 years? It's just, that's the direction things are going. So I think we're pushing out that way. And we do have to consider what happens even in certain parts of growth tier 3, I think. And again, that's something that we're going to have to look at when we finally get back to the area plans, just how to address those issues. I have my own problem with these large lots in an area that we anticipate will at one day become part of the city. But that's the rules for out in that growth tier right now. It just feels to me like we're kicking problems down the road for other people to solve. And which brings me to the last one. I can't approve a variance that includes a no contest provision for a special benefit district, especially if we go with the rest of what we're being told that we don't anticipate this for 20 to 30 years. Some homeowner down the road is going to get hit with a special benefit district and taxed to build this road. And that just seems wrong. I think that they, because most people won't even know about it, as we found from the Queens Road issue just over the last 2 years, that this is an issue. So if we're going to go forward with this, I think I would want us to consider staff to initiate an amendment to the zoning code to limit this requirement to tier 1 and 2. Tier 3 we'll have to take up with area plans when we get to it, if we can identify the direction of growth at that time. And getting rid of the special benefit, waiving the special benefit district.
Thank you, Commissioner Carpenter. David Carter, Chair. I'd like to, oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Willie, did I see your hand? Commissioner Willie?
Yes, thank you. Karen Willie, Planning Commissioner. Queens Road also went through my head when we were talking about this, is how much trouble are we making in the long run if we don't address it now? On the other hand, the rock road and the maintenance and the open ditches being the system that's being used makes a lot of sense too. When Mary mentioned about revising the subdivision regulations to talk about this, I think that's the direction that this needs to go, because that also involves a conversation with the city to know what works for them when they inherit this land, for an annexation, because we don't want to set them up for another Queens Road issue without having some way to deal with that. Maybe it's a question of forming a benefit district early on, so that there's some money in that pot already, accumulating over the 20 to 30 years, that the money's there to pave that road. There's got to be some better way around it than just, do we do it or do we not do it now?
Thank you, Commissioner Willie. David Carter, Chair. I'm going to ask a question of staff that I've asked before. It has to do with the definition of the tiers. We adopted the comprehensive plan with these specific tiers that had been modeled
Based on conditions that existed basically 2 years ago. And one of those conditions has to do with adjacency or access to existing infrastructure. And as the city grows, that factor changes. So one question I have is, what would be the parameters for redefining those very tiers as the built up area of the city grows? I mean, as Commissioner Carpenter said, this lies in tier 3. and yet it's a very short distance from the South Lawrence Trafficway interchange with Bob Billings. Jeff, I'm not sure if you're the appropriate person to answer that question.
Jeff Craig, Planning and Development Services Director. I probably am, so I'll give it a good go here on this one. To kind of go through the tiers again, Tier 1 is land that's already located within the city limits. Tier 2 was created based on modeling out many factors. One of those included both water distribution service potential, fire medical response rates from the stations as they are currently situated, the availability of road and interchange connections, and some other factors that went into that one. The tiers themselves were really generated on where we thought the investment in infrastructure and population growth was going based on the area trends that we saw in the community at that time. We actually modeled them at a 1.0% growth rate, which is higher than the 0.94% growth rate that we're really seeing in the community today. So if you kind of think of it in terms that we have it growing a little bit more than what we would normally see in the community over the last about 10 to 12 years or so. Usually what happens when you do a modeling system like this is as infrastructure comes online within Tier 1, it pulls the Tier 2 line back in towards the city without a large investment occurring in infrastructure, such as a water tower, a new interceptor line, or other items along those lines. So it would take a major investment to push the Tier 2 line out or kind of go in that line. So to think of it this way, for all the work that we do inside the city limits and growing inside, the model would feasibly want to predict and want to pull the line for Tier 2 in because that expansion capacity is being changed based upon changes on the internal services in Tier 1. There's a lot of factors that go into that. It might incrementally change the line. It might, it wouldn't change it drastically, I would anticipate, but it would try to retract it in more towards the city limits. But really with Tier 2 is when we ask our Municipal Services and Operations Department for the city, Lawrence, Douglas County Fire Medical, and some of our other, at the time, public works staff about investment in the community. That was their best assessment of where we thought we would be serving infrastructure to in the next 20 years. And that helped generate the Tier 2, Tier 3 differential that you see on the map. Tier 3 is possible to come into the city limits during the time frame of Plan 2040, but given the parameters that we kind of see in the community, we don't anticipate that occurring at this time before 2040.
Very good. Thank you, Jeff. David Carter, Chair. Any other commissioners have? Commissioner Willie.
Karen Willie, Planning Commissioner. Jeff, can you give us a little tutorial on benefit districts? Are those strictly something that's created by the city and within city limits, or is that something that can happen prior to an annexation?
Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services Director. I am by no means the expert on benefit districts typically. They can occur under a couple of different items. They are created and permissible under state statute. And you can have a county benefit districts and they can occur in certain ways. And there's different parameters around them than you would if you had a city benefit district in some respects. There are instances where you have both a benefit district go both in the city and in the county. And there are some very special provisions that go around that and they can occur. But again, I am by no means the expert on the benefit formation for that one. We do have, get a lot of help in generating those kind of things as such with Queens Road and those items as part of that, because there is a lot of nuance to the law that I couldn't speak to this evening.
Thank you, Jeff. Commissioner Willie.
Karen Willie, Planning Commissioner. So to follow up, the reason I'm asking is I think it's likely unnecessary and a hardship to pave these roads with curbs and gutters that go nowhere for the moment. And yet, if we just pass on it for now and say there'll be no protest to a benefit district in the future, we've changed that from a cost associated with development to a cost that's strictly going to the homeowners in that district after the fact. And I think, as Commissioner Carpenter mentioned, I think that would be a rough shock for these homeowners. So I was wondering if there's a way to, as we look at the subdivision regulations, if there needs to be something spelled out for how that's handled.
Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services Director. The one thing I will mention about the agreements to protest the formation of benefit district is that they are recorded at the Register of Deeds. So as a property would change hands, it should come up in the paperwork in the sale of the properties into the future. Now, we all know that maybe we don't read all the documents at the time of purchasing a house, as we should maybe, but it would come up in the title search and chain that would be part of the Register of Deeds for the property. So they don't exist in a file somewhere. They are actually recorded at the Register of Deeds for that tracking mechanism.
Commissioner Willie, does that answer your question?
It does for the moment.
Okay, thank you. David Carter, Chair. Other commissioners, Commissioner Sands.
I'm also having a hard time with this and consideration of establishing another benefit district that's going to create future headaches for future commissions well into the future. This property is on the ragged edge of Tier 2. I mean, Tier 2 to the north extends, if there was a line drawn from the westernmost edge of where Tier 2 extends north of Highway 40, this property would be within Tier 2. There's a little peninsula that touches, I guess that's East 800 Road. So it's not in Tier 2, but it is on the border. So, and I appreciate Jeff's explanation of why the Tier 2 boundary is where it is, because to me that, I don't want to say it's arbitrary because it's based on professional estimates, but it is not, it's clearly not scientific. It is their best guess in predictive staff analysis. And with it being so close, I'm not sure that I'd be comfortable voting for supporting the establishment of a benefit district that I will likely hear about in my lifetime. Over.
Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services Director. Just to clarify, Commissioner, this would not be establishing the benefit district this evening. This would only require the owner to sign an agreement to not protest a future benefit district if it is established. It doesn't require one to be established. It doesn't outline the process. It just, if one is required in the future, it just has the agreement to not protest that benefit district's creation. So just to be clear, we would not be establishing a benefit district this evening.
Thank you, Jeff. David Carter, Chair. Just to follow up on that observation, and at the risk of speculation, can you outline any scenarios that this would be financed without a benefit district at the time of annexation?
Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services Director. The two that kind of come to mind of a typical instance would be is if the street was to be reconstructed in the future. So if it was at a certain level and it needed to be reconstructed, there may be a benefit district to do that. You typically see those along large arterials and collector streets where there's an interchange that's being, or excuse me, an intersection that is being installed. You also typically will see it if there is a large infrastructure project, such as sewer lines or water lines that are being installed as part of a larger effort. They can take many shapes and forms, and I would be almost certain if I was to take a guess, I would probably be wrong in how it would take root out in the community, what it is. But those are typically two of the scenarios in which a benefit district is typically seen.
Thank you, Jeff. David Carter, Chair. Other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Carpenter.
Carpenter, Planning Commission. I just want to clarify a little bit my concern with requirement suggested in the variance for agreement not to protest a special benefit district. Jeff, I think hit it right on the head. Most people don't read all the documents when they purchase their house because what's in their mind is this is the perfect house I'm gonna get. And going down through all the legal details is kind of the last thing on most people's mind. and not having this agreement not to protest, it's not even the homeowner. I mean, we could be 2, 3 homeowners down the line here from tonight. And they never agreed to anything. And suddenly they're hit with these costs that were never anticipated. There are ways to form special benefit districts, you know, just in my limited experience or familiarity with them, such as sidewalks, you have to have a certain number of people opt in and then you can get it, or the city can suggest outlines and people have recourse to come through the public process and agree to be in or out. They can end up having a district formed against their will and they have the option of court action. We're taking that away by this agreement not to protest. And I know this has been a common practice by the city. I mean, there are little parcels on many streets that have, as part of their development, the agreement not to protest a special benefit district for sidewalks. And part of that was because the code required a sidewalk when there was nothing to connect to. So in lieu of doing that, they required this agreement not to protest. But it just seems to take away rights with the property that most people won't know. I mean, most people don't go out and hire a real estate attorney to review all the documents to find this. There is going to be one piece of paper in the title search that says that this is part of it. How many of us have read our title searches before we purchased our properties that we may be in right now? So that's where I'm coming from on this. I'd rather that the city approach the current homeowner about a special benefit district, and as was stated, they can come in for sidewalks, roads. You have to build a water tower. We have to put in a new fire station, whatever. They can come up for lots of reasons. But I think it's just out of fairness. It should be the people that are there now and not have somebody 20 or 30 years ago agree that you can't participate in the process. And I forgot my second part.
Oh.
So I'll get it and I'll come back to it later.
Thank you, Commissioner Carpenter. David Carter, Chair. Commissioner Sinclair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Luke Sinclair, Planning Commissioner. Excuse me. I have two questions. The first is a follow-up on Commissioner Carpenter's comments, and I may have missed this in the discussion earlier, but is it possible for the city to approach the current owners, even though it's in the county, about a special benefit district now? Is that a possibility? That's my first question. And then I guess that might be for Jeff. And I have a second question, which I could add now, or maybe I can just wait. Jeff, if you want to respond to that one.
Certainly, Jeff Crick, Planning Development Services Director. In my limited understanding of the way that it works, it could extend into the county if there was, if it met the very specific state statutes and rules to do it. I don't know enough of the detail about how and when those occur or what the stipulation around it is, but it is my understanding that yes, they can include both city and county property.
Okay, thank you. Luke Sinclair, Planning Commissioner. My second question, I guess, is directed to Commissioner Carpenter, and I appreciate everything you're saying about I guess the propensity of property purchasers not to really dive into the weeds of the documents that they're inheriting, so to speak, when they buy a property. But I don't see how this would be any different than just kind of taking on the burden of the covenants and restrictions that the developer would have placed on your property when they built it. I mean, people buy properties and realize that they've got big, or what they would consider to be big problems later on down the road quite often. And I think it's not completely unusual. And I don't know if this is accomplishing a goal and people then sort of take the risk on themselves when they buy property and don't look at the recorded documents to the Register of Deeds. That doesn't seem to be something that we ought to be terribly concerned about. Or I'm asking, I guess, is that something we should be terribly concerned about, given given that these sorts of things run with land quite often and not in the agreement not to protest context.
Jim Carpenter, Planning Commissioner. I think that I see those as two different items. Restrictive covenants limit your use, your future use, and what you can do on the property. This one instead is the current landowner, in order to get a variance, is going to put an agreement not to protest a new tax on future property owners. And that one to me is a little bit different. One is, and especially the way it's currently set up, as we saw from Queens Road, where it's not taxed on the use nearby, you know, who's going to be using the road more or less. It's taxed on the square footage of your property, which is quite a shock. You know, why should you end up purchasing a property and find out suddenly you're on the hook for $55,000? That's not something you can really anticipate, because you don't even know what exactly is going to be proposed in the future that you're going to have to be taxed for. It's just this general blanket, I won't object to a tax. And that seems wrong, especially since you can approach people at the time when the need is there. And a lot of people are going to say, okay, you know, if it looks fair, they're not going to have a problem. And like I said, restrictive covenants, yeah, I can't build whatever. I can't build a barn and have cows, you know, outside in my neighborhood. That's different. You can, and even though you're legally correct, you know, everything's in writing. And if it's not in writing when it comes to real property, it doesn't exist. So, and it's assumed by the courts that we all have a duty to read everything we sign and all those. I agree on principle. Legally, that's correct. But I'm just talking about one person agreeing that a future person will not object to an additional tax. And that's how I see the special benefit districts. I think they should be approached openly and fairly at the time, so there can be an open discussion about the needs and how to meet those needs.
Thank you, Commissioner Carpenter. David Carter, Chair. Commissioner Sinclair, do you have any follow-up comments or questions?
Luke Sinclair, Planning Commissioner. I appreciate that, Commissioner Carpenter, and it sounds like it's more approach. I can appreciate, I guess, the distinction you're making there. And it sounds to me like it's more an issue of approaching the current owners, and to the extent a benefit district is imposed, then future owners are going to know going in what they're paying, as opposed to having something sneak up on them after the fact, effectively. And I comprehend that. I appreciate you engaging me on that. Thank you. I don't have anything else, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Sinclair. David Carter, Chair. Commissioner Ashworth.
Commissioner Ashworth, just a point of clarification for Mary Miller. So this discussion that's been happening about having a benefit district declared or formed now as opposed to down the road, what would that do to this application? And how would that happen?
Mary Miller, City County Planner. Usually you declare the benefit district when you're ready to do the improvements. And that's why Queens Road, a benefit district wasn't formed until they were ready to improve Queens Road. So if we did a benefit district now, to be fair to the people who are paying for it now, it should be paved now. But as we've noted, the township won't be able to maintain it. So, forming a benefit district now, I don't think would be fair to the people that live there. And I don't think it would happen. I just don't think they do a benefit district unless they're ready to make the improvements. It'd be more like trying to force savings or something for a future improvement. And these people may no longer live there. So they would be paying for something they don't get to use, even though they would know about it. And one of the differences between Queens Road and this property is Queens Road, the properties next to it abut it, they back up to it. They're on a road that's paved. And we're asking them to pave the road along their rear property line. And their arguments have been, I don't even use that road. And the city has said, well, you probably will use it or benefit from it at some time. And in this case, the property owners would specifically use that road. So it's noted on the final plat that there's a benefit district. And once again, we can't make people look at the plat or notice the note any more than we make them look at their title work. So I would think we either do a benefit district or don't, but I don't think we could even do it now unless we did the improvements now, in which case we wouldn't even need the variance. But
Thank you, Mary. Commissioner Ashworth.
Commissioner Ashworth, given Mary Mill's response to that question, I still feel that building, paving a road now when the area might not be annexed for 20 plus years, given Jeff Crick's response to a previous question, and the infrastructure that is just not built right now to receive the stormwater one or to be in any way maintained, I still think that granting the variance is the way to go.
Thank you, Commissioner Ashworth. David Carter, Chair. And this seems to be it's a big hole in the way this type of development is taking place. We've got a requirement in code that can't be met or can't be sustained or maintained by townships outside the city limits. And we're seemingly setting up future property owners for a cost that they likely won't be anticipating. I think the one thing that, from what Mary has said that I have to say makes me support this is that there is a transaction taking place. I mean, the cost is incurred when the improvement takes place. The property owners will be using that road on their frontage and will be benefiting directly from that improvement. I think it's an imperfect arrangement, and I would hope for maybe some ideas from commissioners with more practical experience in these matters than I have to offer some ways that this hole can be filled or these issues can be reconciled in the future. But I'm inclined to support the variance as it is right now. Commissioner Carpenter.
Jim Carpenter, Planning Commissioner. I'm inclined to support the variance also, absent the staff recommendation that the property owner shall execute an agreement not to protest a benefit district in the future. We're the final vote on this type of variance, so we're going to make the decision now.
Thank you,
and we can add any restrictions that a majority of us agree to. We can remove restrictions that we don't agree to. So that's my proposal, is that we go forward with the variance, because I believe we have demonstrated unnecessary hardship. If we force paving this road, we're putting a hardship not only on the property owner to build this road now that's going to deteriorate, we're spreading a hardship throughout the township, trying to maintain a falling apart road in some drivable condition. So it's not limited just to this property. I mean, we're creating a problem for a whole township if we go forward with this. And I agree that we have some holes in this subdivision regulation that we need to address. And that's something we're going to have to talk about and figure out how to go forward to modify. But for this evening, I'm all in favor of the variance, absent the recommendation of the agreement not to protest a special benefit district.
David Carter, Chair. Commissioner Struckoff.
I agree generally with Commissioner Carpenter's assessment, and I think this would be more appropriate without the agreement not to protest. We've had one similar case in the city recently where the owner of a property was asked to sign the same document not to protest for future sidewalk construction. The very low likelihood that that was going to happen in the near future, and the fact that we were dealing with the current owners of that property at the time made me was agreeable to me, and that application passed with the agreement not to protest in place. I think we've learned a lesson from Queens. I think that it's a very recent, very bright lesson. I think that if we, without the fact is, without a variance, we're going to have a gravel road out there in 10 years anyway. I am in line with Commissioner Carpenter's view that I support this variance without the requirement for the agreement not to protest.
Thank you, Commissioner Struckoff. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on Commissioner Carpenter's alternative? Commissioner Ashworth.
Commissioner Ashworth, I'm just reading part of the staff report here that says that the city engineer noted that he had no concerns with the variance provided an agreement not to protest the formation of benefit district is executed. So can I toss this to Mary Miller and asking what the city engineer, what if there would be an objection now from the city engineer?
Mary Miller, planner. I believe there would be. When I talked with him, he said he thought it should be paved and built to city standards. And he said if it had the agreement not to protest, when I explained to him they can't maintain it, then he thought that was reasonable. When properties are annexed, typically the developer, we don't usually annex 3-acre lots that stay 3 acres. Usually when they get annexed, there's a developer who plans to develop it. And so normally the roads would get improved by the developer. That could be part of the annexation agreement. And there will be an annexation agreement, which we could include wording to require that E779 road be upgraded to city standards when it is annexed. And that way, whatever developer is doing it, when it's developed and brought into the city. And I think that would tie it to development and annexation and not to the individual property owners. So that may be an avenue we could take that the city engineer would still be okay with.
Thank you, Mary. Commissioner Ashworth, do you have any follow-up questions? Okay. I guess I do. David Carter, Chair. So if we were to if we were to pass this variance with the provision that the requirement to waive protest for a benefit district was, if we could strike that, and what is the consequence if we're going against the recommendation of the city engineer? I guess maybe that's a question for staff.
Jeff Craig, Planning and Development Services Director. It is a recommendation for the city engineer. It is the Planning Commission's ultimate purview to make that motion. There are some probably technical items that the city engineer is more aware of than I am, and that might unfold as part of that. But it is ultimately the purview of the board. That is just the professional recommendation from the city engineer in the aspect of the question.
Fair enough. Thank you, Jeff. David Carter, Chair. Is anybody interested in further discussion, or would someone like to make a motion? Commissioner Willie.
Karen Willie, Planning Commissioner. I'm interested in following kind of the discussion that we've heard from Commissioner Carpenter, Commissioner Struckoff, about not having the protest or the provision to not protest the benefit district involved with this. Because I think that means that the city will have to have the discussion with the owners of the properties at the time when the improvements are being discussed, rather than it be a surprise that comes after the fact. However, if I were the city of Lawrence, I think I would greatly object to that, because it's taking away a tool for them. So I don't think that we should just be talking about whether or not we do a variance on this property. We're setting a precedent for how we deal with this problem for developments in the future. And I think that whatever we do has to trigger a discussion about the subdivision regulations so that we standardize that. And of course, all those have to be agreed with the city of Lawrence, and they should be a part of that discussion. So it makes me a little uncomfortable to go too far out on a limb with this one, knowing that we're going to have that discussion in the future. But I hope that we would have that very, very soon in the future. So
I just don't want this to be the only time that we talk about this and then be stuck with following this precedent that I think may not be well received by the city.
Thank you, Commissioner Willie. Is there a specific request that you'd like to make of staff in terms of like what aspects of the subdivision regulations to revisit in light of this situation?
Karen Willie, Planning Commissioner. I think that this body should ask for a text amendment to the subdivision regulations to discuss what would happen with developments in Tier 2 and Tier 3 for road improvements.
Thank you, Commissioner Willie. Jeff, can you respond to that?
Craig, Planning and Development Services Director, that is in the purview of the Planning Commission to initiate text amendments to that one. We'll share that the joint subdivision regulations do require both the Board of County Commissioners and the City Commission to ultimately agree and approve the item because it is a concurrent item in both codes. So both governing bodies would have to ultimately weigh in on that one. So it's something we can definitely, Planning Commission can initiate that and we can begin that process. Just to share with the commission also is that, we have a pretty considerable work plan. So I'm not sure exactly the time or the speed at which we'd be able to get the process initiated and underway, but it is something we could add to the list if the board saw fit to do that.
Thank you, Jeff. I'd like to offer my support for Commissioner Willie's idea, David Carter, Chair, sorry. We've already spent, an hour and a half on this, and this is an item that is going to be returning to us. Every time this type of development is proposed on the fringes of Tier 3. So I think I'd support the idea, regardless of the time frame. It may be something we don't get around to, staff doesn't get around to for another 6-8 months. But knowing that it's in the pipeline for a plan with a 20-year lifespan, I think is a good idea. So I would support Commissioner Willie's proposal. With that, do we have any further, Commissioner Carpenter?
Jim Carpenter, Planning Commissioner. I would also support that. I mean, my request to remove that recommendation not to protest is really based on Mary's statements about perhaps we should consider the difference between Tier 2 and Tier 3. The city engineer is weighing in on the more likely annexed portions in Tier 2 that things match up with the existing infrastructure. And I will always support that. If we, in Tier 2, we probably wouldn't grant this variance and we'd have a street built to city standards with the anticipation it would be connected to the rest of the city infrastructure in the near future. But when we're talking about Tier 3 and 20, 30 or more years in the future, and applying the standard of having to have a city street in a township that can't repair it or maintain it, I think we do need to revisit the subdivision regulations and clarify just which parts are specific to Tier 2 and Tier 3, as Commissioner Willis suggested.
Thank you, Commissioner Carpenter. David Carter, Chair. Further observations, questions, or I guess I'd be interested in a motion, although I'm especially interested in any doubts or dissent from this direction that we seem to be going with respect to approving the variance, but striking the requirement to forego protest of a benefit district. Any further observations or questions from other commissioners? Commissioner Carpenter, would you be interested in making a motion?
I could do that. Jim Carpenter, Planning Commissioner. I would move that we approve the variance from section 11-111B2 of the subdivision regulations requiring roads in the urban growth area to be built to city standards. This variance being associated with preliminary plat PP-20-00166 Kanwaka Prairie Estate subdivision located in the northwest corner of North 1500 and East 800 roads. And this motion is made without adding the suggestion of additional of any conditions on the variance. So that last part is just an addendum. I don't believe if we were going to add that condition, we'd have to specifically put it in motion, but by not putting it in a motion, it doesn't exist.
Thank you, Commissioner Carpenter. David Carter, Chair. Do I have a second?
Commissioner Sands by hand motion. Any further discussion? Commissioner Willie.
Karen Willie, Planning Commissioner. I just wanted to make a note before we move on about the written communications that came with this item. There was a handwritten note that suggested that we don't read the written communications from the public that come in our packet. And even though we don't read them out loud as part of the meeting, I just wanted to put it out there that we read everything that comes to us, everything that's in our packet, everything that's sent to us by email, and we weigh those, even if we don't get a chance in what seems like a long meeting, but goes pretty quickly in terms of the time we get to talk about the things we want to talk about, that we really value the input from the public when we get that, and we pay attention to it, even if we don't get a chance to spell it out at for every single one. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Willie. David Carter, Chair. I'm glad you brought that up. I did intend, because both of the letters we received made the suggestion that perhaps the letters or correspondence weren't being read. And absolutely, I support the observation that commissioners do read all the correspondence, even if they're not read out loud. And also the subsequent observation that anyone who wants their correspondence read out loud is welcome and invited to register and actually give a presentation or a brief to read their own correspondence out loud. In any event, thanks for that observation. With that, any other further discussion? All right, Jeff, can I ask you to read the roll, please?
Certainly. Jeff Craig, Planning and Development Services. Commissioner Ashworth?
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Carter?
Yes.
Commissioner Sands?
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair?
Yes.
Commissioner Struckoff?
Yes.
Commissioner Willie?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you, Jeff. David Carter, Chair. It has already been, it's been an hour and a half. I guess I'd like to poll the commissioners. Would anybody be interested in just a 5-minute recess before we continue with our additional 2 items? I see some nodding. I don't see anybody suggesting they don't want that. I'm going to call a 5-minute recess. Let us return at 8 o'clock. just another moment as we wait for everybody to come back.
Going to unmute us, and then I'm going to go get water. But
Oh, how dare you?
good. So 5 minutes is up as
Okay.
of right now.
Kurt, you ready? We're back. All right.
I'm not sure if we've got quorum yet, Jeff. I'll start as soon as we've got 6 people back.
We do have a quorum.
All right, fantastic. David Carter, Chair. Let's move on to item number 4. Consider approving an amended conditional use permit for ancillary agricultural retail sales at Pine Landscape Center, 1783 East 1500 Road. Mary?
Are you going to be presenting?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Mary Meller, planner. As you mentioned, this application is an amendment to an approved conditional use permit for Pines Landscaping. The CUP was originally approved in 2003. It did expire, and a new CUP was approved in 2016. And the property is primarily agricultural with an area that's set aside for the sale of landscaping materials that are not grown on the site, such as landscape rock, mulch, soil, etc. And under the current zoning regulations, we classify this as ancillary agricultural retail sales. It had another name under the old code, but primarily it was you're a retail nursery selling items you don't grow on the site. Currently, the inventory and customer service areas are located to the east of East 1500 Road, and this application proposes to relocate the customer service area portion from the east to the west side of the road. With the earlier CUP, the office was approved on the west side of the road, and so with this relocation, it would allow customers to go to the office, buy their product, load it, and leave without ever having to cross East 1500 Road. Where today, they go to the office, cross the road, pick up the product, to weigh it and pay for it. And so basically they would still have the east side of 1500 Road for inventory, and they would open up an area on the west side for customer service. So as we look at the conditional use permit and the factors that we have to review, we look at the zoning. The western portion of the subject property is adjacent to the city limits of Lawrence, which has RS10 zoning. And this area is developed with campgrounds, RVs and cabins. It's the former KOA or Jellystone campground, and also a boat and RV storage facility. And then TP Junction is located in the county GB or general business zoning district just to the northwest. So the area to the west of the subject property has a fairly high activity area with a open space component. The northern portion of the subject property is zoned GB, general business. The remainder is zoned Ag 1. And the northern portion abuts the airport motel property, which is also zone GB, the Highway 2440, and agricultural land to the north. This is all zone GB. And while it's used agriculturally, it's possible it could develop with commercial uses in the future. Property to the east of the subject property is zone GB or general business and Ag 1 or agriculture, and it's developed with residences and agriculture. And the property to the south is zoned agricultural and used for agriculture. One of the requirements of ancillary agricultural retail sales is that they have to be ancillary to an agricultural use on the property. If the sales area is less than 500 square feet, or if it's 500 square feet or less, it takes a simple site plan. If it's larger, then it requires a conditional use permit. So approximately 5 acres on the west side of 1500 Road will be utilized as the customer service sales area. That's about 16% of the site. And no changes being proposed to the inventory area to the east of East 1500 Road. That would remain. And the plan notes the distinction that the east side will be inventory and the west side will be customer service. The proposed use would maintain the agricultural and retail uses in the area and would be compatible with zoning and land uses in the area. The proposed use is also compatible with and consistent with the character of the area. It is somewhat of an expansion of the nursery or the ancillary ag retail uses that are there now. They're just being relocated to the west side, but it'll be slightly larger. We'll have the inventory and then the new customer service area. The overall area contains a mix of rural and urban uses. The Lawrence Municipal Airport is to the northeast. Agricultural and residential uses are in the immediate area, with ancillary ag retail uses to the east of East 1500 Road. And then we have the commercial and industrial uses to the west. The addition of the ancillary ag retail sales use will result in a mix of agricultural and retail uses on the subject property, in keeping with the mixed uses in the area. And so in order to ensure compatibility with the character of the area, lighting is something we always look at very closely. They'll be using just building mounted lighting, and these will be full cutoff features to minimize light trespass, and so there's no light glare off site. We also look at how suitable is the property to the uses to which it's restricted, and how suitable is it to the property or the use that's proposed. The property is very suitable for agricultural uses. It contains a mix of class 1 and 2 soils, and prime farmland is located throughout the property. This CUP will remove a portion of the property, about 5 acres, from agricultural production, but the ancillary ag retail sales will help maintain the agricultural uses on the property. It is also well suited for the proposed use, as it currently contains the office for the ancillary ag retail sales and is located on a major collector road in close proximity to a highway. With the revised regulations, we look at what would be the impact of the CUP on the natural environment. Drainage is a principal concern in this portion of the county, and the Douglas County Caw Drainage District Board expressed concern with stormwater runoff and commented that steps should be taken to ensure that this development does not increase stormwater runoff. There was another application recently. It was a site plan for a use just to the north, went to the county commission a few weeks ago. And the commission directed the county engineer to work with the applicant to develop stormwater standards and then to apply them to that project. And so these have not been developed yet, but that stormwater engineer will work with this applicant as well, and when the standards have been developed, and apply them to this project, so that when it goes to the county commission, there will be stormwater management measures for them to review. And a condition noting this requirement is included as one of the conditions of approval. Compliance with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan recommends that we preserve agricultural lands, and it also recommends that we support the growth of small to medium-sized businesses. The proposed change to the conditional use permit would result in a safer and a more efficient operation of the business, which could help support and grow the business. And the ancillary ag retail sales use would also help maintain the agricultural use. On the other side, we would be removing 5 acres out of agricultural production. The Northeast Sector Plan recommends that the future land use of this property as agriculture. The ancillary ag retail sales use would help maintain this agricultural use. The proposal is in compliance with the recommendations in the long-range plan for the area and with the comprehensive plan. This property is within Tier 3 of the urban growth area, which is not expected to annex within the life of the comprehensive plan. And while the use is compliant with the recommendations of the comprehensive plan at this time, staff recommends a time limit of 20 years to coincide with the next update of the comprehensive plan, so it can be reevaluated to ensure it's suitable for the area and that it still remains in conformance with the land use recommendations in the comp plan. So as far as reviewing the site plan, adequate parking will be provided on the site. Landscaping has been added along East 1500 Road in the form of a mix of evergreen and deciduous trees to buffer the view of the sales area from the roadway and nearby properties. And this was done in result to a inquiry from a nearby property owner. In staff's opinion, the review criteria and golden factors are met with this proposed conditional use, and the plan is compliant with the standards of the zoning and land use regulations. Staff recommends approval of the CUP with 2 conditions. 1, a 20-year time frame, and also the condition that stormwater management measures be installed per the county engineer's approval, and revisions made to the CUP plans as needed. And this would need to be completed before the item goes to the county commission. And I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any. And I see that the applicant is also present. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. David Carter, Chair. I see 3 representatives for the applicant, Dean Grobe, Brian Pine, and Matthew, forgive me, Goff or Go. Who would like to speak first on Mr. Grobe? Are you representing the applicant at this moment?
Good evening, Chairperson Carter.
Oh, forgive me.
Goff. Hi. You had it right the first time. It's Goff. I'm with Barbara Emerson Law Firm, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant, Pine Landscape Center, LLC. And you're right, I'm joined by Brian Pine and Dean Grobe. Mary covered all the talking points I had. This is an amendment of an existing CUP that's been around since 2003. The current CUP is entirely east of East 1500 Road. The expansion area will be entirely west of East 1500 Road. No changes are being proposed to the area that's east of the road. So the road is literally the dividing line between the two areas. Pine Landscape Center wants to focus all of the customer activities to the west side of the road. This will reduce the traffic across the street and prevent any kind of conflicts from the traffic crossing East 1500 Road like they do today. The expansion tract is zoned both GB1 or GB and AG1, and the entire area is being site plan. Yes, we believe this will be a compatible use with the mix of and other uses in the area. We see no detrimental impacts. It maintains the character of the area. This CUP enables the applicant to support the existing ag operations and is consistent with and does support the long-range plan for the area along with applicable zoning. We have no comments or objections to the conditions in the staff report. I think it's worth making a comment about the site plan itself. The plan shows the addition of some new paved areas. There was a little bit of asphalt and there's some concrete, but the majority of this area is gravel or storage bins or the areas for the bays where the material will be located. So in that respect, it's a lot like what you see on the east side of the road, and that use has been there and operating without a problem for 17 years. The drainage impacts of the current use to the east will be instructive on how the new CUP area needs to be designed. And second, gravel is not as pervious as native grass is, but it's definitely the type of surface that allows some drainage, unlike asphalt or concrete or like a building. So in that respect, I don't think it's accurate to say that there's a lot of impervious surface being added. It's not a shopping mall parking lot that's being proposed. Gravel, for example, is not within the definition of impervious surface under the definition of the city code. And I know that the county engineer is working on standards right now. The applicant has no problem working with the county engineer to make sure that this project does not create any new drainage problems for Caw Valley or Grant Township. So those conditions are acceptable, and we look forward to working through the new guidelines with the county engineer. I didn't hear until I think Mary just said it that it's something we must do before we get to the county. I think it makes sense to do that, but I guess some of that depends on the timing. But regardless, we would definitely request that the Planning Commission recommend approval of this CUP. I'll stand for any questions you have. If you ask me something I don't know the answer to, I may ask Brian or Dean to chime in.
Thank you, Mr. Goff. David Carter, Chair. Let's see, I don't see anyone registered for public comment, and I'm going to ask for confirmation of anyone in the council chambers.
Kyle Cody with planning. No one has arrived to speak on this matter.
Thank you, Kyle. David Carter, Chair. With that, I'll turn it over to the commission. Any questions for the applicant or for staff? If not, I've got a question for the applicant. Mary mentioned the potential loss of some agricultural land on the west side of the property. Can you clarify what the intended use is for the land that's being vacated?
Well, the intended use of that land is exactly as shown on the site plan. It's going to be the location of this expanded ancillary ag sales facility. So I think the picture is exactly what it'll be. And in that sense, with a 20-year term, the good news for the very long-term view of the property is that, if a decision were to be made in the future to have it become ag again, it's not the type of use that would preclude reverting back to an ag use.
Thank you, Mr. Goff. David Carter, Chair. Other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Willie.
Mr. Goff, will the entire 5 acres that's being proposed in the CUP be gravelled for the purposes there?
I would say that, you know, I'm looking at the site plan here, and the disadvantage of a Zoom call is we can't put that up on the Elmo or anything. I've done the deal where I hold it up to the camera, but I don't think that's helpful either. If I could direct you to the site plan, you can see that there's areas shown as gravel drives. There's palletized product displays. There's some areas that might be asphalt for parking. There's some areas to the north, which is in the GB zoned area, that would be block product bins on pavement. And there's an area to the northeast that covered block product bins on pavement. So if you can look at that and try to estimate what the breakdown is, you can see that it's not all pervious. It'll probably be a majority of gravel, I'd say, but I don't know that every square inch that's not part of the product display will be gravel either.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schaaf. Thank you, Commissioner Willie. David Carter, Chair. Other questions? Well, I just have to say, I mean, it seems like an eminently sensible plan, and I think the issue of pedestrian safety and the convenience of customers, as well as, you know, efficient planning by the applicant and the business owner, make a lot of sense. I see no reason not to support this. I'm interested in other comments, questions from commissioners, or any motions that one might make. I know it's late. Yes, Commissioner Sands.
Mr. Chairman, Rob Sands, Planning Commissioner. I agree with your assessment. I don't have any concerns or reservations. So I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval of the conditional use permit for ancillary agricultural retail sales with the following conditions enumerated 1 and 2 in the body of the staff report.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Recommendation of approval.
Thank you, Commissioner Sands. David Carter, Chair. Do we have a second? Commissioner Carpenter by hand motion. Any further discussion? All right.
Jeff, can I ask you to call the roll, please?
Certainly. Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services Director. Commissioner Ashworth?
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Carter?
Yes.
Commissioner Sands?
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair?
Yes.
Commissioner Struckoff?
Yes.
Commissioner Willie?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. And thank you to the applicant. David Carter, Chair. That brings us to the last regular item on our agenda. Let's see, item number 5. Consider initiation of rezoning for Lone Star Lake properties located near or along Lone Star Lake from the current AG2 or AG2 to a Lone Star Lake residential district. Mary, it's your lucky night. You have three presentations in a row.
Yeah. Mary Miller, planner. This is just to request the initiation of this rezoning. And the zoning and code staff started working on this back in 2018. They had a lot of issues with the little lots around Lone Star Lake. They're very, very small, or even small per city standards, but they were platted before zoning regulations and subdivision regulations were adopted in the county. And so they are non-conforming lots. They don't meet the lot standards for the AG2 district. And the biggest issue is that almost all the structures are non-conforming because they can't comply with any of the setback standards. We have a 50-foot setback, and some of these lots are barely 75 feet deep or 100 feet deep. And so every time someone would want to do a building improvement or a change to a building, they had to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals and get a variance. And so zoning and code staff looked over what the sizes are, and they developed standards. And they met with the residents, the owners of these properties. They're listed in a graphic in the staff report. You can see just a little lot. So they met with all those property owners at the Marina building on Lone Star Lake and explained the provisions, explained what the zoning district would be. They extended the comment period and the property owners all provided comments. And that's how we developed the Lone Star Lake district that's in the zoning regulations today. And it had been the intent to go ahead and rezone at that time. But we thought our zoning regulations were just about ready to get adopted. So we thought, well, let's wait and just get this district added to the zoning regulations. So it took a little longer. And our next step now is to go ahead and rezone these properties. We again mailed letters to everyone that's involved, everybody who would be affected, and let them know we're looking at initiating the rezoning. And I received a lot of phone calls. And the number one question was, how is this going to affect my taxes? And so the county appraiser provided me with about 2 paragraphs that kind of explained it. And so I could send that out to anyone who asked. They weren't really very satisfied with that answer. It wasn't very clear. So there's a kind of like a homeowners association or neighborhood association, and the leader called and suggested that when we have our meeting, we'll have a Zoom meeting, to include the county appraiser so he can answer questions and explain, since that seems to be the number one issue. They don't want their taxes to go up just because they rezone. They may prefer getting their variances. So we'll work with them. We'll send out the notices and have the neighborhood meetings. And then before it comes back to you, we'll notify everyone within the half-mile range. So it'll have a bit more public notice. But we're just asking that you initiate the start to work on the zoning district.
Thank you, Mary. David Carter, Chair. Of course, there's no applicant and no one signed up for a public comment. Kyle, I'm going to ask you one last time. Anybody in the chamber there?
Kyle Kobe with Planning. There is no one here.
Thank you very much. So I'll turn it over to the commission. Anyone have any questions or comments for Mary or for the rest of staff? Commissioner Willie.
Sorry, I can let Commissioner Sinclair take a turn. If you want to start with.
Fair enough. Commissioner Sinclair, would you like to start?
Sure, Luke Sinclair, Planning Commissioner. All I was going to say was it looks to me like the report is very clear that there's a procedure that's going to follow after this is initiated. And so nothing we need to talk about tonight involves any real review criteria or the golden factors, anything like that. This is purely just initiating it that gets the ball rolling, starts the process, and it'll be back to us for those sorts of questions in a public hearing at a later date. Is that right, Mary?
Yes, that's right.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you, Commissioner Sinclair, for that clarifying question. David Carter, Chair. Commissioner Willie, you'd like to follow up?
Karen Willie, Planning Commissioner. This was one of the things about the zoning regs that just really worked for people, and I hope that we can explain it well enough and that people will understand what's being gained by that. But just being able to take out building permits and all those things that just work better, and getting loans for properties will all be helped by this. So I'm excited for it, and I'm happy to make a motion if we're ready.
Thank you, Commissioner Willie. Does anyone have any other observations, questions they'd like to pose before Commissioner Willie's motion? If not, then please go ahead, Commissioner Willie.
Karen Willie, Planning Commissioner. I move that we initiate the rezoning of the Lone Star Lake properties located near and along Lone Star Lake from the current AG2 district to the LS district, starting the process.
Thank you, Commissioner Willie. David Carter, Chair. Do I have a second? Wow. Who hit the buzzer first? Let's give this to Commissioner Ashworth by hand motion. Any further discussion? All right, with that.
Jeff, could I ask you to call the roll, please?
Jeff Craig, Planning Development Services Director, certainly. Commissioner Ashworth?
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Carter?
Yes.
Commissioner Sands?
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair?
Yes.
Commissioner Struckoff?
Yes.
Commissioner Willie?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Mary. That brings us to miscellaneous items. We do have one item. We may have more depending on any input from the commission. So we need an appointment to the Lawrence Douglas County Metropolitan Planning Organization Policy Board. This is a board that typically meets the third Thursday of each month at 3 p.m. This needs to be a county appointee, and I would like, is there anyone who would like to volunteer for this appointment? Oh, Commissioner Struckoff. How good of you to raise your hand. So I guess I should ask Jeff, is there any specific language we need to make for this appointment? I have to admit, other commissioners have been through this before. I'll have to ask. Any specific language with that, or is Commissioner Struckoff's hand motion all we need to move on with this beyond this item?
Jeff Crick, Planning Development Services Director. Given the existing format that we're in, I would actually recommend probably following a very similar line to how we do our chair and vice chair process for that one. A nomination in a second with a roll call vote just to confirm it under these current meeting conditions.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Jeff. David Carter, Chair. With that, I would like to nominate Commissioner Struckoff for this position. Do I have any other nominations? No? Then Jeff, could I ask you to call the roll, please, in support of Commissioner Struckoff's nomination?
Certainly. Jeff Crick, Planning Development Services Director. Commissioner Ashworth?
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Carter?
Yes.
Commissioner Sands?
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair?
Yes.
Commissioner Struckoff?
Yes.
Commissioner Willie?
Yes, and thank you.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Commissioner Struckoff, for your service. And so do I have any other miscellaneous items before we adjourn to this evening? Commissioner Willie.
It turns out I have two because one added this evening. I would like to make an motion. I would move that we initiate a text amendment to the joint subdivision regulations, standardizing road improvement requirements within the developments within tier 1 and 2. Sorry, tiers 2 and 3.
Thank you, Commissioner Willie. Do I have a second? Commissioner Carpenter, thank you. David Carter, Chair, sorry. Any further discussion on this item?
Perhaps we'd like to discuss it some more. Okay, with that, Jeff, could I ask you to call the roll, please?
Jeff Crick, Planning Development Services Director. Commissioner Ashworth?
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Carter?
Yes.
Commissioner Sands?
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair?
Yes.
Commissioner Struckoff?
Yes.
Commissioner Willie?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Commissioner Willie, for the motion. You said you had two items. Would you like to mention the second?
I do. The other is just kind of a heartfelt request that we find a way to reinitiate our mid-month meetings, our study sessions that haven't happened since we started in the Zoom format for COVID. We're going to be doing this for a long time. I think we need to figure out something that works so that we stay engaged, so we stay learning, so we can do our job well. There's just a variety of topics that we need to discuss that we don't have a chance to discuss until an item comes forward, and that's not necessarily fair for the applicant to be the guinea pig for some of these things. And the one I'm thinking of in particular is I'm very uncomfortable seeing any more agricultural rezonings from Ag 1 to Ag 2 until we have had a discussion about how we plan to use that tool, when we plan to use it, how many lots do we have already. So that's one topic that we need to talk about. Annexation was something we all put on the list that we wanted to work on for this year. The area plans that we seem to not be able to move forward until we tackle those. There's just such a large volume of work that we're going to need to get back to. So I know it's been complicated and difficult to figure out how we have enough time and availability in the
the technology to make these meetings public, but I'm just an appeal to say we need to find a way.
Thank you, Commissioner Willie. David Carter, Chair. Obviously, this is a topic that has been discussed in lots of different forums. And, this is a situation that kind of fell upon us, but it has been 5-6 months by now. Jeff, I know, this is as Commissioner Willie said, this is an issue that has lots of implications.
Public meetings around availability of telecommunications. But I also know it's an item that staff has thought through quite a bit. Curious if you can share your perspectives at this point and maybe open this up to some discussion from the commission on ways that we can move forward.
We'd be happy to. Jeff Crick, Planning Development Services Director. We've looked at a couple of different ways of trying to kind of resume the mid-month thing, and to just be honest with the group here, and I'll just kind of put all our cards on the table here. It's really a matter of resources that we have available to it. Under the current circumstances that allow us to, under the current resolution that allows us to have the meeting in these circumstances with Zoom, requires us to have a level of broadcasting capabilities to go out to the TV channels, to YouTube, and to the other mediums that we have there. Unfortunately, though, we have one Kurt, and his time has become one of the most valuable commodities in our entire operation, because he is now broadcasting, and this room is now being used for every advisory board meeting that the city has. So the 30, 40 some boards that the city has going on, including the city commission, planning commission, and all of the other advisory boards all the way through the MPO, have to run and operate out of this room. And so we're taxed on the time the room is available, and we're also taxed on the staffing and resources available to get those meetings going. So instead of introducing a meeting that may cause an imbalance or cause some timing issues for that, we've kind of reserved the item to not have the mid-month meeting, because we didn't see it to be rising to the level of some of the other advisory board meetings that need to meet and provide that guidance to the governing bodies. With that said, I will share with the commission something that will be coming out very soon for that, is that we are looking to change in the next month your meetings, kind of maybe shifting your Monday meeting into being more of a mid-month meeting, because we already technically have the Monday's time slots reserved. So as the agenda allows, we've been trying to figure out a way of kind of holding our Monday meeting while being your mid-month and kind of meeting the requirements for the Zoom meeting. So your September meeting on September 21st will be a joint meeting with the Multimodal Transportation Commission that will be doing that. And we are hopefully going to save all of your actionable items to your Wednesday meeting to kind of fill that void. Staff also realizes that we value the mid-months probably as much as you do, and it gives us time to interact, learn ourselves. So we value those just as much, I think, as you do. So it's been a noticeable loss in the planning division that we haven't had them. But knowing the limitations that we currently have, we didn't want to overtax our ability in that respect. So I've also, if Amy would like to chime in or add anything, I'd make the floor available. But that's kind of where staff is currently at with this situation.
Thank you, Jeff. David Carter, Chair. Amy, would you like to follow up on that with anything and want to make any further observations?
I'll just echo what Jeff said. I think we're all missing our mid-month, and I think by understanding the limitations on the resources and also the resolution, which actually states essential meetings only, that by us trying to incorporate mid-month sort of as a work session type item on your Monday meetings is a way to achieve the same goal while also being cognizant of our resource limitations.
Thank you, Amy. David Carter, Chair. I guess that is conditional on the workload or the number of items in the backlog for the agenda, and it's frankly, I'll speak personally. I think it's good to see that September seems to have a light enough load that would allow for that. A couple of questions. One, I know the issues come up. First of all, ideally, we'd like to have consensus among the commissioners that this is going to be an arrangement that's going to work for them on an ongoing basis. It's always a trade-off. But second, a little bit of explication, a little bit of overview of how that works from the standpoint of public comment. When we have mid-month meetings, it's typically just open to the public. They can show up, they can observe, they can speak up at any point. Can you give some explanation of how that would work? Under the current situation where people need to sign in or write in advance if they want to make any kind of public comments.
Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services Director. That is one of the aspects that we have been trying to figure out the ins and the outs of quite often. When you add in that kind of component and complex to it, that's when it starts to become hard for us to unravel the item. There is a little bit of alleviation of that as it occurs during one of your scheduled actionable meetings, your Monday, Wednesday meetings that you tend to have, because you do have general public comment and you do have the openings, and we have those provisions in place to kind of roll through that. The details of how we would work out a non-essential meeting and public comment under your bylaws has been something that we haven't quite resolved the details to yet. That's been one of those things we look at and we keep working through, but we haven't been able to come to a full conclusion at the moment, given where we're at.
Very good. Thank you very much. I have lots of other questions, but I'd like to give other commissioners a chance to speak up. Oh, I'm sorry, Amy, please go ahead.
Amy Miller, Assistant Planning and Development Services Director. The other thing that I will add is that, September is a little bit of a test for us, having that joint item. And so we'll have to see how it goes. We'll also be doing some research on the bylaws and seeing what public comment, if any, is appropriate. But the other added benefit to that is it'll be legally noticed with our regular Planning Commission notice that we provide, which is a little different than your mid-month meetings.
Very good, thank you. With that, like I say, I've got David Carter, Chair. I've got a couple of other questions or comments, but I'd like to open it up to other commissioners to speak up. First, I'd just like to ask Commissioner Willie, since you brought this item up, do you have any reaction or feedback to any of this?
No, I'm just glad that it's being discussed, and I'm happy to hear what other people think.
Thank you. David Carter, Chair. Other commissioners? Commissioner Struckhoff.
I also have missed the mid-month meeting. I think it's important part of what we do, and important part of not just our preparation for individual agenda items, but also for the general knowledge about some of the programs and operations that go on in support of the planning process. Thank you, Commissioner Willie, for bringing this up. I think that the idea of having it on Mondays it's a nice dovetail for now. I think everyone should be ready to possibly change that again. We're in a state of flux, and we're going to be for a while. I think though that right now to have if we have the space and the time in our existing meeting nights, it makes perfect sense to do that. I don't what the structure will be. Do we have our mid-month on Monday and our regular agenda on Wednesday? What if we need half of a night for more agenda items? But those are all details I'm confident can be worked out. But like Commissioner Willie said, I'm glad to see that the discussion is ongoing.
Thank you, Commissioner Struckhoff. David Carter, Chair. Commissioner Ashworth.
I concur, but I just want to say I'm particularly missing that mid-month meeting that we had scheduled that was taking us through the permit process. I thought that, so unless anybody's going to develop one of those I'm just a bill cartoons for permitting, that would be great to have that.
Any songwriters? Anything?
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Ashworth. David Carter, Chair. Other observations? Commissioner Sinclair.
I don't know if this is an observation or a question, but my impression of our mid-months, which I agree have been fantastic, and it's been sad not to be able to have those, but they've had the feeling of being sort of like work sessions where the primary benefit is the commission, and while public is allowed to come, there's no opportunity really for public to start chiming in and doing and this, that, and the other. They can observe and kind of be part of the process in that regard. I guess one thing is that I'm not, maybe confirmation that that is true. That's an accurate representation of what the mid-month is. And then will having the mid-month on a Monday night significantly change that aspect of it? So it would be maybe the benefit would be less to the commission in terms of us just learning some of this stuff substantively and preparing us to be able to do our jobs, like Commissioner Willie said, do our jobs well, and shifting it more towards an opportunity for the public to come when they see a topic maybe that they feel passionately about, to come and make it to basically have it be a platform for them to speak into the process, which I think would take away some of the maybe the benefits of the commission. There's benefits to public comment too, obviously, don't get me wrong, but I see a potential of us losing maybe some of the aspects of mid-months that I appreciate. And I guess my question for Amy and or Jeff is that a possibility as we kind of evaluate the public component to a Monday night mid-month? Or is that is there really no risk in that happening?
Jeff Crick, Planning Development Services Director. That is one thing that we've been trying to really get nailed down in many ways, because it is, like you said, normally at your mid-month meeting, it is a meeting of the whole. It is not to conduct business. It is an opportunity for the commission to learn and discuss and kind of be a forum to educate in many ways. So you're going to lose a little bit of that, I think, given the possible format that this would entail, because you would have your formal opening, your introduction, your housekeeping items, and then you would move to recess or adjourn in a very similar line as how we're kind of penciling this all out at the moment. We're still trying to get the full details ourselves locked in. But in the instances like that, it could be, like with many of the items there, like to give you an example, in your bylaws and in the rules of that is preliminary plats don't require public comment, but the chair usually makes that available as an option in case somebody would like to provide it. So it has been in instances that you've had your mid-month meeting and the vice chair who runs the mid-month meeting has made the option for public comment to be available as just a course of action and privilege, if you will. So it could go both ways. We're still trying to get all those details sorted out and figured out by the time we get to the next meeting for you. But that is something we also were kind of cognizant of, is that it might lose a little bit of that open learning opportunity, is the way we always describe it, that you might not have the same, it might lose a little bit of the feel, but it would still have the same value potentially. That's something we're aware of.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sinclair. David Carter, Chair. Commissioner Carpenter.
Yeah, Jim Carpenter, Planning Commission. I really want them back, and this modified version certainly seems the best option. The mid-months are always time limited, so if we begin our Monday night meeting, if we need extra time, we could cut back on the mid-month meeting in time, depending on what is going, because right now what we had was an hour and a half set aside, and we rarely used all that time. So I don't see how wouldn't interfere very much, since we just keep a time limit. The one thing it's going to get in the way of is the free discussion that we've sometimes had, since all our faces are going to be preserved in perpetuity on a YouTube video, but that's what we're going to miss. But we seem to be stuck in the mud on making progress on many items, that sometimes we have those discussions at mid-month and we come up with a consensus on. I hope we can get something worked out so we can move forward on some of these bigger issues that we keep bringing up in the meetings but never seem to be able to talk about otherwise.
Thank you, Commissioner Carpenter. David Carter, Chair. I agree with everything you've said, and I think from the standpoint of scheduling, I mean, our mid-months have never taken more than an hour and a half. They've always been 7:30 a.m. to 9 o'clock a.m. and have often taken somewhat less than that. I think from the standpoint of fitting it into the schedule, I guess it's conceivable that we could make them essentially a miscellaneous item at the end of a Monday meeting, even if there are agenda items. So I think as chair, for me, the important thing is that other commissioners are, even though we have this time blocked out, it's common practice, common expectation that when the agenda is relatively sparse, that there is no meeting on Monday. And for, to build an expectation that there will now always be meetings on Monday to fill out that part of the expectation of the mid-month meetings, I'd like, it's helpful for me that other commissioners be on board with that. So I think as Jeff and Amy mentioned, the September meeting is kind of an opportunity to take training wheels to the concept. And I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, that because it is essentially a joint meeting between these two commissions, it effectively operates by the normal rules. These other bylaws, these other issues around the bylaws are less of a concern. Is that correct? I guess that's a question for Amy.
Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services Director. That's correct. Because it is a joint meeting, we are following COMA, CORA, and noticing provisions for both boards. David Cronin, who is the staff liaison to the Multimodal Transportation Commission, and myself, we've been working that out for a couple weeks now to make sure that we get both boards in the proper notification lines and channels to make sure that the meeting's all good by the book. So it's under normal circumstances, a joint meeting takes a lot of logistics and preparation for. Under these, it's taken us a little bit longer than we would hoped for to kind of get to the point where we're ready for September. But yeah, it does require a different level of preparation and notification for a joint meeting than we would for our mid-month normally.
Got it. Great. Thank you, Jeff. David Carter, Chair. Other observations or questions? All right. So I guess I'll be really interested in seeing how the September mid-month, end-of-month meeting goes, since it'll be basically the same week as the regular meeting. With and will we have an opportunity then? It's odd because normally you'd say, well, let's take these things up in the mid-month, but it becomes a kind of self-referential. I guess I would ask that we get an update in that meeting of what staff is what staff has figured out with respect to these other requirements. But I'd like to thank Commissioner Willie for bringing this up. I'd like to thank staff for working on these logistics. One thing is, just because something's not talked about in the regular meeting obviously doesn't mean that people aren't working on it. So it's good for this to come out for an open discussion. And I guess I'll just ask, does anyone have any other items they'd like, or any other observations? Commissioner Carpenter.
No, I had another item, not an observation.
Okay, all right. Well, let's, item number 4.
Jim Carpenter, Planning Commissioner. With the resignation of Commissioner Weaver recently, I've really started to think about the value of certain appointments on our board, those specifically being the members of our board that come from the non-incorporated areas of the county. I have learned so much from Karen and Jim Weaver, and before them, Penny Van Ock, about the attitudes and the desires of the rural residents who we're making decisions for. Given how we are appointed to this commission, the county appointments are not limited to rural residents. And since, given the current population in our county, about 70-75% is in the city, 30% outside the city, not counting Baldwin, Eudora, and Compton, of course. But I would ask that we put on our miscellaneous agenda for next month, if we can get the notice published, possible amendment to our bylaws to amend city ordinance number 3951 and county resolution number 69-8, which created the Planning Commission back in March and April of 1969, that the appointments made by the county at any time, there should be 3 of the 5 appointments be from the unincorporated areas, just out of parity, and for the benefit of the rest of us to understand those issues out there. And I don't see that that's a big change. It would happen as our terms expire, or our second terms expire for the county appointees, and it would be incumbent on whoever the chair of the county commission is at that time to fulfill that obligation, to look for somebody from that area that can speak to those issues. Because I saw a lot of head nods when I mentioned about the value of those voices on the commission. I want to make sure that we can preserve that. And a lot's changed since 1969. We've set up how commissioners were chosen. The city was much smaller than the county at that time. So now we've got the reverse. And I would just like that on our agenda for next month, if we can get that notice out to amend the bylaws. And that would just be section 2 of the resolution and ordinance that created us. Specifically just that the county appointees should consist of 3 out of the 5, at least 3 out of the 5 be from the non-incorporated areas of the county. So if we have consensus, I don't know if we need consensus, but I'm just asking it to happen. And under our bylaws, we just have to be able to have a discussion after notice. And it would take 2/3 of us to vote in favor of it, forward it both to the city and county commissions for their review and approval.
Thank you, Commissioner Carpenter. David Carter, Chair. I just, before I acknowledge anybody else, I just want to say I think it's a fantastic idea. I do foresee some discussion over the question of should versus shall, but that's a great.
Those are the same in statutes, should and shall. You're speaking about shall and may.
Okay. Well, that's really interesting because grammatically, I would say they're not at all the same. But
yeah, well,
yeah. But in any event, thank you very much, Commissioner Struckhoff, please.
Well, as county commissioner, county appointee who lives in the city, I fully support that idea. The rural voices that I've been fortunate to share this commission with have been extremely important in both my growth as a commissioner and a citizen, and I really appreciated everything they brought. So I agree with what Jim said 100%.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Struckhoff. Any other discussion on this item?
Jeff Craig, Planning Development Services Director.
And I guess at this point, because it's does this?
Jeff Craig,
This is not a
Planning and
motion,
Development
right? This is just a request. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just to get clarification on the commissioner's ask here, is this for discussion on your miscellaneous item, or would this be for, because I don't believe I'd have to double check this, but usually this would not be in the purview of the Planning Commission for an actionable item, but this could be for a discussion that would be correspondence sent on to the Board of County Commissioners and the Lawrence City Commission. The other aspect of that I would put out there is it may not necessarily constitute an ordinance change. It may just be a revision to your bylaws that are required. Would it suffice to kind of do that research and share with the commission that as a miscellaneous item for information at your next meeting?
Tim Carpenter, Planning Commissioner. You're reading through our bylaws and this ordinance. The ordinance specifies who appoints the numbers to our commission. Our bylaws don't address that at all. So I think we're really talking about an amendment to the ordinance just as we amended it 2 years ago. And I can't remember if that was on miscellaneous items or on a regular agenda item. But looking at the Article 8 of our bylaws on amendments, it does not say who may or may not initiate these, which to me says we can initiate it because ultimately it's going to require approval by all 3 bodies. And the only thing specified in Article 8 with the amendments is that we have 1 month advance notice of what we're going to be discussing, and it requires a 2/3 vote in favor of advancing it to the City and County Commission, and it does not amend our bylaws until both those bodies also approve it. So I guess I'm asking that we put it in the appropriate section of the agenda. And I don't think the language is very hard. I would prefer to see a strong suggestion that that be done. Other boards have requirements for composition of the board. Lots and lots of boards do. Yeah, I mean, you have to have certain backgrounds or live in certain areas. So I don't see where I'm proposing anything that's different from other boards or commissions that we already have. So I'm just asking if we put this in the form that we can have a discussion about whether to amend the ordinance, because that seems to be the directing authority for appointments. And then if we approve that, forward it to the other two bodies.
Thank you, Commissioner Carpenter. David Carter, Chair. Jeff, does that answer your question?
Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services Director. I think I'm following this correctly. The document that was amended 2 years ago was your bylaws. It had to go on to the City and the County Commission. That would be it. I'd have to go back and look at the ordinance from the 60s that established the Planning Commission, because I think it only specified the ratio of the appointments, not necessarily the preferential seating of the appointments like you would typically see with an architectural review board that would have a historian, an architect, and some of those other items in there. But I'd have to go look at those documents to see where that would need to fall in line. That was the reason I was asking, was to make sure that the commission was wanting staff to have latitude to review both of those items so that we could get it into the right document and construct for that request.
Jim Carpenter, Planning Commission. I don't have any problem with that, Jeff. You're going to have to talk to legal about exactly the proper way to do it. But it took some hunting to find the original resolution through the city website today. And it's not linked up to amendments over the last 51 years. So I don't know what they all are. I only have the original one right now. And like I said, the bylaws don't specify. It really doesn't specify how we're appointed.
Jeff Craig, Planning Development Services Director. Next month, the legal has already been issued for next month's meeting, so we couldn't bring it back for actionable consideration at your September meeting, but we would be able to have time to probably get that in line and sorted for your October meeting. So just to kind of give you an idea of our notification timelines, I think the soonest we'd be able to get that back to you would be October at this moment.
No, I'd like to do it as soon as we can. Jim Carpenter, Planning Commission.
David Carter, Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Carpenter. I'm guessing that also has to do with the timing of, the eventual appointment of, or the filling of this vacancy. Let's see. I guess the one thing, and I don't know if it's up for discussion now or when the language of this, change in the bylaws comes up, but I think it's worth mentioning that, I support Commissioner Carpenter's perspective that the composition of the commission should reflect the population distribution of the county, of the city and county. One thing I'm a little wary of is mandating a specific number of seats, and with the recognition that that ratio is likely to change over time. So 50 years from now or 25 years from now, if the city is 80% urban and 20% rural, do we have to have or would that commission need to have a bylaw change, or would there be some sort of representation that is no longer in tune with the population distribution? Commissioner Willie, you have a perspective on that, or on something else?
Karen Willie, Planning Commissioner. I think all of that is great discussion for us to have when we have the item on our agenda. I think there are quite a few ways to look at it, but I'm really glad to have that conversation. We had 3 items that were county-only items today, and I was really feeling the loss of Commissioner Weaver and knowing that I'm the only one that is not a City of Lawrence resident serving currently on the Planning Commission, and I'd like to have some company. So I'm just happy to have the discussion in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Willie. And David Carter, Chair, and thanks again to Commissioner Carpenter for the really useful suggestion. Is there any further discussion on this item, or should we move on? Or would someone like to raise another one? All right. If not, would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn? Commissioner Struckoff and David Carter, Chair, do we have a second? Oh gosh, let's give this to Commissioner Sinclair. Any, I guess, if there's any further discussion, if not, then Jeff, could I ask you to call the roll, please?
Jeff Crick, Planning Development Services. Be happy to. Commissioner Ashworth?
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Carter?
Yes.
Commissioner Sands?
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair?
Yes.
Commissioner Struckoff?
Yes.
Commissioner Willie?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
All right, we are adjourned. Thanks everyone for a fantastic discussion. Wish everyone a good month. See you next time.